Well, what's going on, everybody? Dave Fennoy here. Another Wednesday, another Ask Dave Fennoy Anything. It is 6 p.m. on the dot, and here we are together. And let's see, I'm going to say hello to a couple people here right quick. Brody Sweetman, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Oh, Terry Briscoe is already in the house. Hey, Tom. Must be that Boston thing. I know that's what it is. He's going with the Boston thing. He knows that Tom is coming up in just a little bit there. Get in the car, go to the bar, have some fish at the Star Market for all those of you. And I waited just a little bit. So, Stacy, my Walking Dead game fan, I can say hello because you come on every week and you put up with us talking about nothing but voiceover. And I don't talk about my career in terms of I've played this character and that character, and you never get any of that stuff. We just talk voiceover. So I still appreciate your being around. Want to remind you all the Ask Dave Fennoy Anythings live on my YouTube channel, Dave Fennoy Voiceover Training. Please subscribe. If you are interested in coaching with me, DaveFennoy.com, there's a little study VO tab at the top. You can click on it and book yourself, and we can get you going. I take people from beginning to pros that want to clean up their act, just get another set of ears and brain on what they're doing, and help them continue their careers just like I do from time to time. Well, enough about that. Let's meet our guest. One of the nicest guys in this business. And when you are at a convention or something, you always know it's him because you see the hat. There he is, Tom Antonellis. Woo-hoo! The crowd goes wild. How are you, Tom?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me, Dave, and thank you so much for those kind words and introduction. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy
Love
to
you.
hear all the guitars in the background. Do you play those things?
No, now these are my dad's guitars.
Uh-huh.
Yep, I'm in my dad's. Oop, I gotta get myself. Yep, my dad's kind of music room. Growing up, this was my sister's bedroom. That's actually a picture of my sister and I.
Oh, okay. And we're
We'll
going to talk
learn
about
backwards
this
here.
just a little bit.
Yeah,
But
this
yeah,
is my sister's kids right here.
oh yeah,
But
there you
this used
go.
to be
Two
my
kids.
sister's bedroom.
You sent me that picture. I didn't use it. I thought people
That's
would go. Now, if somebody sends me a picture, a baby picture with a naked bottom, I might use that one.
I'm
But
sure there are a few of those.
I tell you what you did send me naked, your head a couple of times. In the years that we've known each other, I have not seen you in public without a hat.
Yeah.
It
That's
has
true.
it is your trademark.
Yeah, it is.
And
This is the trademark.
yeah. And
The logo.
we were talking beforehand before we started here, and how many perfect. I love it. Love it. It makes so much sense. How did that become your trademark, by the way?
Well, it's a good question. I was thinking about I was rebranding, and I was thinking about wanting to evoke speech and the spoken word in an image. So if you look closely at it, it is, it's me in profile and my mouth is open.
Yeah.
So, and it's actually me. So I actually still have somewhere in my files, I have the picture of myself that I took to give to the silhouette artist whose name is Candace.
Oh, okay.
Candace Colbert.
Hey, Ken,
Yeah.
how you doing?
Hey, Candace. I love my logo, Candace.
And how long
And
ago?
yeah, so and then I wanted a distinguishing thing. And now I got this in New York City on a really important trip, and I've kept it all these years. It's easily over 20 years old
Oh, wow. Oh,
at
wow.
this point. Yeah. So it's in good shape. It's in really good shape.
Classic hat, and men don't wear classic hats much anymore. It kind of
Know it.
in the 50s, early 60s, I'd say, and then a lot of
Yeah.
them started growing our hair, and we said, screw the hats.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's talk voiceover. So, Tom, how did you get into this wacky business?
I have two answers because I kind of view my real beginning was in this house. It was we would play in this room. We would play in my former bedroom. My sister and I would play, and we would do characters, and we were really TV kids. That doesn't mean we OD'd on TV, but we grew up on Sesame Street. We grew up on educational shows, Mister Rogers' Neighborhood, and then became early evening TV consumers.
What were your favorite
Happy
shows
Days,
back then?
Laverne and Shirley, Three's Company. The Golden Girls. We love the Golden Girls. Brady Bunch, and and then of course Saturday, where we could get up and watch cartoons, and just that was our day to really indulge with TV. We had moderated time the rest of the week. Um, if you exclude our early childhood of encouraging television like Sesame Street. So because we were exposed to the kind of best kind of shows that are still favorite shows for us today, um, and because our family just happens to be a mimicry sort of family, you know, you should hear my mother's impression of The Godfather and my father doing an impression of my mother doing an impression of The Godfather, and them arguing about who really did it first. I'm getting it out into the world, Mom. You did it first. We all know you did it first. And my Marlon Brando is really my impression of my dad doing my mom doing Marlon Brando,
Okay,
because we just saw that kind.
we got to hear a little bit of that.
So, Dave, you asked me onto your show, and we're gonna talk, and we're gonna have a good time, but you never asked me over to your house for a cup of coffee.
Because you live so
You
far.
don't think to call me Godfather. And
And what I love, and I notice other people
it
who,
works, by the way, with the hat.
especially that, the people I know who do impressions very well, their whole body, their whole face
Yeah.
uh, distorts into what that person is, and you really went there. Bravo, bravo.
You get to see Julie's Robert De Niro someday. It's freaky. But yeah, so I think that we were always doing the core skills of the job.
Without
And
knowing that you were training yourselves.
that's right. Julie and I would call our play sessions episodes. We realized that in conversations on our podcast. We said, yeah, we would call them episodes. We would hype each other up and go, let's have a really good episode today.
Wow.
Because we were learning, on tonight's episode of Three's Company, we heard promos, we heard them called episodes, and we had little story arcs in our play. And when we wrapped up, when Mom said, Thomas, Julie, come on up from the basement, we begged for 5 minutes so we could wrap our episode.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Usually with a cliffhanger, by the way.
Ah,
Usually with a to be continued. We had a stinger, for crying out loud.
that's kind
We
of
have a thing called a den and den. And it's our stinger for when we're done playing. When we were kids, when we were done with the episode and needed to come upstairs to have dinner, we would verbally say, den and den. Like it was like a show stinger, like when G.I. Joe would go to break, on the middle of the G.I. Joe will be right back. Or like the Batman changing a scene in the Batman show.
so true, so true, so true.
We would do mock commercials. I remember doing a mock commercial in this room for gloves.
It's always been interesting to me that the people I know who do the most in cartoons, video games now as well, and often other areas of voiceover, really were into cartoons were really into taking on those characters, imitating those voices. I used to do that. At some
Yeah.
point, I kind of backed away from it a little bit and went back to it when I was on the radio. But
Yeah.
now, outside of that, when you
So
decide,
outside of that upbringing, I had an arts background, performing arts and visual arts background, and I did get into acting for on camera, and I also got into editing. I love editing too. But I developed psoriasis and a real hang up about my appearance, and I believed, rightly, wrongly, or indifferently, I come to realize it's not as in the way as I thought it would be,
no, really,
because
everyone's
artists
can't
are
choose.
awesome. Right, but I felt I developed a real hang up about my appearance. My weight was fluctuating up and down. I couldn't get control of my weight, and I developed a skin problem. What I call a problem. It's a problem for thinking that your image is going to prevent you from getting the job. And what I didn't realize is how much of how masterful Hollywood makeup artists can be. And I
Oh,
didn't realize how they could beautifully normalize skin. When I was on The Kids Are All Right, I wept in the makeup chair at how normal they made my face for my role. I couldn't believe it. It was as it I didn't know that it wouldn't be a problem. So I assumed it would be, but I knew I was an actor at my core. And I just remember one day I was coming home from my on-camera acting class. Kim Darby was my teacher at the time, the woman
good teacher.
who played opposite John Wayne in True Grit, and John Cusack's mother in Better Off Dead. Just great actor. And she always encouraged me, but I felt lost. And I just said to myself, well, I could do voiceover. Then I would not only get around the psoriasis, I would get around type. I could do roles I would never be cast for.
That is one of the
So,
joys of voiceover, especially in character work, is
yeah,
that you're not typecast, that you can play
right.
that the camera would never allow you to play.
Yeah.
So now, what years are we talking about here? You're moving from. You've been taking acting classes. Did you go to university for theater?
Right. So, um, I guess I began my acting training, script analysis training, stage training, um, character work, character development. If we exclude my childhood play and all of that, began to study it in high school. Um, I'm always been a two-dimensional artist, and I was accepted to an art school. I was accepted every college I went to. I chose Syracuse University. I'm sorry. I was accepted at every college I applied to, is what I meant to say. I chose Syracuse University because I thought it would give me a broader experience than a straight up art school like Rhode Island School of Design or
Mhm.
Mass College of Art, which are great schools. But I ended up choosing Syracuse. I'm so glad I did that because uh, I ended up finding my life's purpose when I chose filmmaking, film art as my major. So while I was accepted to school on a two-dimensional art portfolio, I ended up more so focusing on performance art, both in filmmaking, which was true film, 16 millimeter film. I'm old enough to have used guillotine
Oh yeah.
splices and taping it together and punching the sprocket holes. And so we shot on real 16 millimeter film, and I acted in other people's films, and I had my own films. I wrote my own films. We did everything with each other, and I fell in love with editing in school. But I also always felt the pull to the performing. So my minor was drama. So film art major, filmmaking major, drama minor, and studied theater history, performance. Um, that was
So
through
now,
college.
how did that? When did that translate into a voiceover career?
Right. So, 96, I graduated college. I got my first job straight out of college. The first professional audition I ever did, I booked. And I was a Romulan at Paramount's King's Dominion in Doswell, Virginia. So I auditioned for a walk around theme park character, and I was a theme park character for a summer. And the entire time I was doing basically a transatlantic dialect. Good evening, human. How are you? You know, it was, I didn't know that's what the dialect was, but it was
But you had heard it as a child on television, and you had imitated it.
exactly,
You had it,
exactly.
and so
Yep.
often that's
Sub
exactly.
Commander Tomas was his name. Uh, and so I fell in love with all of that, you know. So, like I said, first audition, and I booked it. So
So
I
then
made the plan to
you
move
knew it
out
was
to
going to be
California.
easy.
Right. Of course, it's going to be easy.
Steve.
Uh, I knew I wanted to come to California. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in film. And I did work in editing for quite a while before I felt again that pull to acting again. I was not satisfied behind the camera. While I love editing and I'm still great at it, I really can say I'm great at it. I love it. Every episode of Back Through the Basement is edited to a fairly well by me. I love it. But I love acting more, and I missed it. So that's when I went back to class. And when it became voiceover was when I developed psoriasis. So I don't remember exactly the year, but I know I moved to LA in 98 and probably took a couple of years to arrive at the decision to come back to acting. So maybe 2000, I guess.
Okay, let's say about 2000. Who'd you work with? Who were your first coaches?
Rick Zeef was my first coach.
Ah, okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Nick Omana was my first coach.
Nick.
Yeah. Nick Omana and Rick Zeef they were so close that
Yeah,
I sometimes forget which one was first, but
I know
it
of
was Nick.
Rick. I don't know him well. Nick Omana is a friend of mine. And when I came to LA to do voiceover in 1990, he was already a fixture here, not
Mm.
only as a working actor, but also as a coach. And he has molded quite a few successful voiceover actors. And I would have to say he's got a little imprint on me in a few places.
Oh, that's so cool to know.
Yeah.
You know, one time I had garnered a significant amount of work in VO, and we ran into each other. I actually asked him to be on a project that I actually shelved, but it was still very fun to work with him. And I thanked him, and he said, Tom, all of that stuff was in you. I just taught you how to bring them out and let them pay their fair share of the rent.
There you go. There you go.
And I'm so grateful to him and Rick for those,
Okay,
early lessons.
Tom, are you getting a little verklempt here?
Yeah, it's gonna
Okay.
happen.
Uh, for
Everyone
those
who
for
knows me
those
knows.
who don't know, Tom Antonellis wears his feelings on his sleeve, um, and his feelings of gratitude and caring always come out in tears. Um, we joke about it a little bit. I tease you a little bit about it, but I actually think it's one of the most endearing things about you,
Thanks, Steve.
that you do feel your gratitude, your joy, the friendship, uh,
Yeah,
so personally, so
yeah.
fully. And
And I feel that from you. I feel that appreciation for that side of me, and it's and even if it comes with humor sometimes, because what I do, I feel your love through that. You
yeah,
know, I feel your friendship through that, and you are one of the people for whose friendship I am so grateful. I respect you to the nth degree, and I don't know anyone who doesn't feel the same way who knows you.
you're too kind.
And what's so beautiful about you is you are so talented and so accomplished, so knowledgeable and so gifted, at the same time so kind, so humble, and so still a student. You're the best kind of artist and the best kind of professional voiceover professional to model oneself after. So
Wow.
to have you to count you as my friend and to know that you see in me the things that I value about myself and are the parts of me that I'm proud of and know that those parts of me are the reasons why I'm good at what I do as an actor. Uh, it just feels really good to know I have your respect.
Thank you. Now you're gonna make me a little verklempt. Let's take some see some comments here from some people. Let's see, what's this? So Kevin Michael Henderson, hey Uncle Dave and Hatman.
Hatman.
Hatman. Nice to see you, Dread and Hatman. All right.
Dread
Uh,
and Hatman. Oh my God, that's our show.
Dread and Hatman.
Dread and Hatman.
Ah,
Dave, let's
coming
friggin'
soon,
develop
Dread and Hatman.
it and pitch it.
He had hair. He has a hat. Dread and Hatman.
Dread
Tonight
and Hat.
on ABC. Barry Briscoe, the East Coast is always better when Tom is with us. Tom is a former student of, I know of your affinity for British dialect, but if there is a favorite outside of that one that you had to learn, which one would you choose?
Mm.
Yes, actually.
I never think of Terry as a former student. You know, I always think of my clients as, or students as, they're always my clients. You know, once you are, you are. Thanks, Terry. You're awesome and wonderful guy. And he's right. I do love the British dialect. And I do think it's, you know, if you're a Brit, I think learning the general American dialect is critical. And if you're a general American speaker, I do think that learning an RP dialect is critical because I really think
Hey,
that
when you
they
say
are the,
RP, that's received pronunciation, which
yes.
is um, kind of like in our country, there is a language of business. Uh,
Yeah.
which is kind of a standard Midwestern Ohio, West New York, that kind of accent that's fairly flat. Um,
Yep.
and there, it's what we hear the royalty, how they speak.
Yeah.
Because when
Yeah. It's kind
you go to
of,
London, I mean, England has zillions of dialects, and just in London by
yeah.
itself, 20 or 30.
Yes. Yeah. I was actually working with someone today from Croydon, Croydon, South London. So yeah, you're absolutely right. But if you were to homogenize the American sound down to one kind of set of rules or set of concepts, it's called General American, sometimes referred to as Midwestern, although to me, Midwestern refers to the sound of North Dakota, Minnesota, the kind of Fargo, you betcha
Yeah,
sort of sound.
don't you know?
Uh, don't you know?
No, but
But
it
if you
wasn't. It
distill,
wasn't always called that.
no,
Growing up in Cleveland, Ohio,
yeah,
I always heard, "Oh, you have a Midwestern accent," but
it's
they
true.
kept pushing it further west and
And north,
and north because that
yeah,
Alaskan accent and the Minnesota accent, for some reason, are very similar. I don't know if proximity to Canada, but
could be. And yeah, you know, I don't know why that confusion over Midwestern exists, but it is definitely two usages. When I teach, Midwestern refers to North Dakota, but I usually will write the title, but then I put as heard in, because even something like saying a Southern dialect, there are so many Southern dialects. So I would say, you know, for me, American Southern, I borrow the Paul Meyer distinctions. American Southern, as in Kentucky and Tennessee, Deep South, as in Alabama, Mississippi. I borrowed the David Allen Stern distinction for the U.S. farm and ranch belt, as heard in Indiana, rural Illinois, Kansas, Missouri. Texan's easy. You just call it Texan. But then, of course, there are numerous towns in Texas. And of course,
so
I'm talking Caucasian Texan, not anything Latin in root.
yeah.
But
Now,
the question to Terry's point was like, what is there that I think would be really wise to study beyond, you know, if you're a Gen Am speaker learning RP, if you're any dialect in the UK speaker learning Gen Am, I think it would then come down to where you see yourself working. So, for example, if you see yourself working in video games, I think a transatlantic or mid-Atlantic, both terms are used, unfortunately, it's confusing. Transatlantic or mid-Atlantic is helpful. Dave, you have so many otherworldly realm game titles to your credit. I'm sure you would agree that that kind of dialect is critical. I have found a lot of work with my Bostonian and New York sounds, my New England sounds. I've found work. In fact, I just announced this week I'm in a podcast called Chinook with um, uh, couple of stars that somebody works on. Kelly Marie Tran, for example, from Star Wars, The Last Jedi, Rose Tico in Last Jedi. And for that one, I got an audition that was talking about a gas station attendant, no specific request. And I did a regular speaking voice choice for take one. And I did a take two. They didn't ask for it. I just chose to do a take two. And I did the Midwestern sort of sound, the Fargo sort of sound.
Yeah, don't you know?
And I booked it. And in the session, because I had two takes and I didn't have feedback as to which take they responded to and why I booked it, my first question was, I did submit two takes. Which one did you want me to do for this character? And they were like, oh yes, it was the second one. In fact, we didn't even know who the character was till we heard that second one.
So having a few dialects in your back pocket can be the difference between booking and not booking. I always find that true. I usually, now let me ask you this: you get an audition. They may have said General American. Do you just go with, okay, I'll give you a General American, but this says something else to me? Do you ever just, okay, I'm going to give this guy this voice. He's going to be from here.
Yep, I do. I have to feel strongly. I'm not a spectifier, but if the specs...
Define spectifier. I think I know, but I want to hear what you have to say.
I don't seek to defy the specs, I seek to provide what's asked for. Yeah. But if I feel strongly that, and it's usually in a take two. Yeah. And sometimes, by the way, I will be even bolder and put the bold choice as take one and give, that's a, down to each audition decision. Yeah. But more often than not, if they don't specify, I would do what I did in the case of Chinook, where they didn't specify, so I offered it. In a great example, I think, of truly defying the spec because I felt passionately that it should be a certain way would probably be the Boston Celtics commercial. Now, this is a Boston Celtics commercial. By the way, it was nominated for a New England Emmy. It didn't win, but it was nominated.
Hey, nominated is a win.
Yes, I'm the sole voice in this commercial, and it was a collaboration between the Boston Celtics and Jack's Abbey Craft Lagers, which a Bostonian would call Jack's Abbey Craft Lagers. And it's for a friggin' beer. It's for the Boston Celtics and a beer, right? What could be more Bostonian? What could be more asking for a Bostonian dialect? Now, the Boston Celtics, I had the ear of the actual producer who works there. So I was corresponding with them, not through my agent. It just happened to be I had their direct line. And they adamantly wanted it to be General American. Just the guy knew me, knew how I sound like this. This is not Bostonian. He wanted this voice. And I said, it has to be a Bostonian dialect. It has to be. And they said no. And I swear, Dave, I said, I defied their no's probably 4 times to me finally presenting it this way. I'm going to give you the General American, but please let me do a take two. Let me just try it as a Bostonian. They finally acquiesced to even allowing me to do it just because I wanted to give it to him.
Set him up. Get him. Just let him do it one
Yeah,
time.
just
We won't
let him
use
do
it.
it. Now, no, I do not advise people fighting this hard the way I did, but I felt passionately, like I said. And so I did it as a take two. And they even said, and now just don't make it thick. I said, no. If it were a dial that went 1 to 10, I would set the dial to 4. Trust me. And they said, okay. So I did the General American read, and then I did the Bostonian read on, I think, the same piece of, the same audio file, and sent it. And I said, let them decide. They not only chose the Bostonian, they called back and they said, we're choosing the Boston. You were right. We love it. And your audition is adequate to, we're going to cut your audition into the commercial.
Don't you just love that?
Where do we send the check? I mean, that's it.
I always love it when your agent says, "Oh, you booked that thing." I said, "Okay, when's the session?" "Oh, they're just using your audition."
Using your audition,
which to me says, if it's a 30, make sure it's 29.5, not over 30.
Yes.
Yes. If it's a 60,
come in on time.
Bring it in on time.
Yep.
I promise you that is happening a lot now, where they're just, love it, we're going with that. So. No auditions, only performance.
One of my first gigs, Rick got me, and it just so happened that he was conducting some auditions, so I went to him that day. And same scenario, we booked. He called to tell me I booked it, and he said, and we just need to know where to send the check. That was one of my early wins. Yeah.
Now, you have an interesting career. I know there are people who live in different places in this business now because we can. But you're kind of living in 3 different places?
Well, I'm kind of bi-coastal. I am bi-coastal. I have tons of roots in LA, and right now hanging my hat literally and figuratively in Massachusetts, where I grew up. I'm in the home I grew up in. The house that has the basement of Back Through the Basement podcast in the basement. And I also am a local hire for New York. So I really can work in the 3 cities.
So you're a local hire for 3 different cities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Know anybody else who has pulled that off? Told me about it. So let me ask you this. What's your, since you're in LA, you're in New York, you're in Boston, or outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Right. What's your studio set up for those different places?
Well, the New York, I'm simply a local hire, where I would just rent a space. But what I mean is I have people I can stay with.
Yeah.
The studio setup here is in flux. I'm building it, which I'm really excited about. I am building the booth of my dreams. But in terms of like my mic setup, I'm on it now because it's mobile. A Rode NTG5 mic, mini shotgun.
Okay.
It's like this long.
Yeah.
SSL2 plus interface.
Okay.
But the booth I'm building, I'm actually literally building it myself, to the extent that I bought the saw recently, and I'm beginning to design the space. So I am really relishing the idea of creating a booth that is truly my own in the basement. I'm literally coming back through the basement into my life. Yeah.
Speaking of,
I also use like a local studio. Like I almost booked something the other day, actually was released, but I was communicating with a local studio. I would have used the local studio just to have the peace of mind because the booth isn't finished.
Okay. Now, you have mentioned your podcast with your sister a couple of times. Oops, that's looking for. That's the one I'm looking for.
Julie.
Your sister Julie, with whom you guys had a show as kids.
Yeah, always playing.
Always playing. So what do you guys do on this show?
So Back Through the Basement literally started during the pandemic. Mom and Dad basically said, both Julie and I were thrown out of work, as so many actors were, and if you were working another job, some of that stopped as well. So we were both unemployed for the first time. For me, for the first time since my childhood paper route, was I unemployed. I've never been unemployed.
Wow.
I work
I hope you thought of
hard.
it as a vacation.
At the beginning, there was some vacation like feelings. I it took quite a while. There was a hiccup in my paperwork, so it took quite a while for unemployment actually to start coming in, the moolah of unemployment. So there was stress. But to kind of self soothe through the pandemic, which so many Americans and world citizens found so challenging, Julie and I found it very difficult. At the beginning, I was actually quite down. So mom and dad said, "Why don't you go through the basement?" And they just wanted us to literally go through it and throw stuff away and eliminate and organize, and wanted me to do it, over Zoom, because Zoom became how we all connected. Now we knew that we could connect visually. We could have done FaceTime or Zoom. And Julie at the time, she still does, lives here. I was in LA at the time. So that's what you see in that logo image. It's me in my apartment and Julie in the basement, because except for now where I actually am here, I wasn't in the home throughout the
Yeah.
whole 6 seasons that we've been in so far.
And what do you guys talk about? What's the thrust
So
of the show?
we go through all our toys and our belongings, and they launch. We could go through a box and find kind of what's in this image here. It's me with a sock monkey, a Kermit the Frog toy, a Darth Vader action figure. Julie's holding a Viewmaster, a Grover puppet. She's got our dollhouse behind her. She's holding a Barbie doll. Now we could have found all those in the same box.
I noticed you said our dollhouse. Because
Yes,
the two
that's
played
true.
together, so it wasn't her doll. It was your guys, both of your dolls.
It's interesting. By the way, I think it's episode 40 that we find the dollhouse, and but it's somewhere in the second or third season. The dollhouse episodes are some of my favorite episodes. That dollhouse, which that's a pretty faithful cartoonish representation of how it looks, that was given to Julie 40 years prior, exactly 40 years prior to the date of the episode in which we found it.
Wow.
It was 40 years later, and it was a Christmas present to her. But our whole lives, we always viewed all of our toys as ours.
Interesting.
And when I tell you, I played with that dollhouse. I was the dad and the daughter, and Julie was the mom and the son of this four action figure family that we were given. And the greatest thing about the dollhouse, and we talk about it in the podcast episodes, was the dollhouse is scaled to action figures that are about the size of Star Wars and about the size of G.I. Joe that were so popular in the 80s. We had some Star Trek characters. Captain Kirk showed up there, all about this big, G.I. Joe posable size scale. So we had so many action figures in that scale that we brought all of them. All of them would parade through the dollhouse. We would use Flint from G.I. Joe and Captain Kirk and Spock from Mego Star Wars, Star Trek, the motion.
Tom,
I meant to say
you had a unique
General Nadine from Star Wars.
Yeah.
Everybody paraded through that dollhouse.
Like you had a very unique and magical childhood. Maybe you weren't out playing football and running the streets with a bunch of other kids, but you and your sister had a special connection.
That's right. That's what Back to the Basement celebrates. It celebrates that childhood, and it celebrates mom and dad in every episode because they provided this space. We have this room in the basement called the office. We pronounce it oofus. Rini, I'll be in my oofus. And we were given a whole room to set up exactly how we wanted. We found hand-me-down school desks, and we set it up, and we played Office. My father would bring home. My Bostonian came out. My father would bring home old plumbing manuals that were out of date. They'd been upscaled at the plumbing company, and so he'd bring the old ones home. They end up in the basement. One of the phones crapped out in the house. It doesn't work anymore. We had to get a new phone. The old phone went to the basement so that Julie and I could answer the phone. One of our favorite things to do is like pretend that we're on the phone and the other person's just doing a silly voice of the other end of the phone call.
So you got your
That's like Bob Newhart comedy.
you got your improv in at
Absolutely.
the time.
Wall to wall improv was our childhood play.
And how much does improv serve you now as a voiceover actor?
Oh, hugely, hugely. I think it's critical. Our Julie and my childhood play is absolutely wall to wall improv. We did some recordings. They'll never see the light of day, but we recorded stories with our main characters. Renee and Titi are our main characters. We do the voices on Back Through the Basement all the time. And when we recorded those, we really kind of it was really to record every childhood character we could remember that we had. And those movies, which were captured by a friend of ours, he's the silent participant. He was the cameraman, and Julie and I played every role. And those movies are fully improvised movies.
Wow. Let me ask you this. How many of those voices you created back when you were a kid have come back to life in work you're doing now?
I use them in auditions frequently. One of my favorite characters that Julie and I kind of both created, we kind of split the voice off into two people and called them cousins. One of my favorite voices, and I think it is my mother's favorite character that I do. And his name is Belford. Bilford. And I find it really exciting, Mr. Fennoy, to be on your show and to be invited to say a few words. He's very well spoken, one of the sweetest characters. And Julie loves when I do him, and he's very special to us. And he's been on Back Through the Basement, so I feel like I can do him here. But he's very special. And what I'll sometimes do is Belford is really here. Has a very special sort of very unusual sort of speaking voice. So I'll sometimes dial him to here, and just be a little bit different, right? Or TD is more so here. This is one of my main characters I do with Julie's kind of here. So I'll sometimes dial him to here and just use this. So to me, this sort of voice is kind of this really works for a sort, I'm a lawyer, and what we're going to do is we're going to get your case together and we're going to take it to the judge. There's a certain, enough. It's so me, but it also doesn't sound like me.
Yeah.
It's so rooted in me because Julie and I did it literally for decades. So I can speak as him.
It's something you learned how to do naturally, not somebody that had to teach it to you. And many people who would like to do, say, animated voices, voices that are not their own, they'll get a voice and it's just a voice. But the voice has to have a personality, a history, a worldview, so forth and so on.
So much so.
Which is why people like yourself and other people who started doing this, imitating other people and family members and actors and politicians when they were young, have natural careers in animation. I want to bring a few more questions in here. Let's see. Going back to Mid-Atlantic, the Acadian accent was a mother accent for the Midwestern dialect. Acadian is a mix of Canadian and American English along the border. There you go.
Kevin Michael Henderson Jr. You're awesome.
Michael Sessoms, I think this one's for me. Is Get Your Game On a good VO convention for games? It is. It is.
I've
And
not personally attended, but I know it just never happened to be. I was never available. It was Get Your Game On LA was in November almost all the time, and I was just never available. I really wanted to go, um, but I know almost every presenter, and they're all wonderful.
oh yeah. Let's see. Denver Darkness. A lot of buzz for the SSL and Steinberg interfaces. Any feels on Motu or Behringer audio file?
Um, what I really love about the SSL2 is it's very user friendly. So if a person is, I talked about my editing and the art of editing. I love the act of mixing, mastering, things of that nature. That level of minutia is really not of interest to me. Because not that there isn't art in that, there is, but I prefer the friendly stuff so that I can be expressive in art. So when I learned, for example, editing, went from linear editing, cutting with guillotine splicers, to computer editing, that was huge for me. So I learned all that I could about the tool, but it was always to facilitate the art. So with this particular tool, it happens to be right here, the SSL2 Plus. This particular tool is so user friendly, so simple, so clean. It frees me up to do my work behind the mic.
Yeah. You know,
So
our
more about the Behringer in that
our
way.
equipment these days is more like a car. You don't have to know how to do everything on the car. You just have to know how to drive it. And the
Yeah,
simpler it can be, I got to change oil and do that. Well, I'm driving a Tesla now, so no oil to change. But um,
right.
you don't have to be an engineer to use the equipment in your studio, which is why we have people like uh, George and Tim and Jordan and a few other of our tech people.
Uncle Roy.
Let's see. DF
George
Race Tom.
my
What's that?
Rode. George the Tech Whittam recommended my Rode NTG5.
Yeah. Question, Tom. How did you get into learning, studying, and eventually perfecting dialects to the point of being able to coach them? That's a question I wanted to ask. Thank you, D.
Oh, DF Racing or Racing beat you to it. Um, Thank you for the question. And it started with feeling that there was a hole in my acting training. Um, I felt that while I got a great education in acting, both in college and high school and college, I didn't feel that I got enough in this area. So I sought out coaching and tutorials for myself. And I had a dear, dear friend in California. I also obtained a lot of guidance from when I did improvisational comedy and sketch comedy from my coaches and teachers and castmates in that area, because we would play games where that would be some of the things we would have thrown out at us, you know. And in that scenario, you're doing usually the low hanging fruit comedic version of an accent or dialect, and because it only needs to be funny for the improv game. But I eventually said, I really want to know this properly. I don't want to do just these cartoonish versions. And I had a dear friend. He's unfortunately passed away, but we were dear friends and castmates at an improv theater in California, and eventually we actually were roommates for many years. Uh, and I would call him absolutely my until he passed best friend on the West Coast, and he was great at this. So while he wasn't a dialect coach, he coached me. And then he taught me how to understand IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet Symbology. He gave me some of my first tutorials, his tutorials. He bequeathed them to me when he became sick. They are among my
Oh, here we go again.
prized possessions.
No, I know. I know.
He also gifted me his, totally side note, he gifted me his entire Star Trek novel collection,
Oh boy.
bequeathed them to me. And I loved him. He was my brother.
Yeah.
So he really woke up the part of me that doubted whether I could get this right. Then I became an avid consumer of tutorials and research. He got me past any of the initial hangups that I get my clients past. Um, and then I studied voraciously. I love Paul Meyer's accents and dialects for stage and screen, and I love David Allen Stern's various tutorials. So I can't recommend those more highly. And then, as to the question about how I became good enough to coach them, I am a teacher in the arts for over 25 years. So I have taught acting, improvisational acting, comedy, ballroom dancing, illustration, graphic design, I said acting, movement,
Wait.
magic,
Ballroom dancing?
ballroom dancing,
Did
yes,
that one coming.
close up magic, stage magic. I've both done and taught all of these things, and you'd be surprised how similar getting results for a client who's interested in dialects is to ballroom dancing, which is probably the thing I taught for the longest period of time. Because it's you so many of my clients, we of course are working on the skill, but there's so many clients in both ballroom dancing and dialects that came to me convinced they couldn't do it, yet came to me and wanted it.
Hoping.
There's so many hoping, needing early success to prove that they can, and needing a teacher who can break it down, and knowing, having a teacher who holds themselves to an educational excellence high enough to know that you got to have numerous ways to get results from people if you're going to tell somebody that you can teach them something,
Yeah.
and enough humility to self eliminate when you can't reach them,
Oh yeah.
and be able to say, all due respect, I don't think I'm the right teacher for you, because I think you need blah 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 that I am not skilled at, gifted at providing.
I do a lot of
So,
dialect, but I don't teach them because I learned them just listening and
yeah,
imitating. Um
mimicry.
and
And there's physical to the dialect. So there's a muscle memory aspect. So that's similar to dancing. And there's emotion to the dialect, because it isn't just enough to know how to do the sounds or the rhythms. If you can't emote, you haven't, it's not useful as an actor. And therefore that is also key in dancing, because you want to eventually get to a point in dancing where you know the moves but then can feel the music.
and there's a feeling, a certain music to them, and
Oh
there's a
yeah.
certain muscle memory. Uh,
Yeah,
because certain dialects, how your mouth, your embouchure, your tongue moves is going to be different. I
absolutely.
had to do a job in Swahili once. I didn't speak Swahili, and I came out with a sore tongue and a sore mouth because I was using muscles I had never used before to do this. So, if somebody's
Wow.
interested in getting in touch with you for dialect training, how can they do that?
Tom Antonellis, VO.com. There's a coaching tab.
Okay.
It'll take you to my coaching website that has a full write up about what I offer as a coach, and my list. I think it's 17 or 19 dialects or something like that.
Your dialects are from the United States, the UK, and anywhere else?
Yeah, there are a couple of foreign accented speaking English accents. So a dialect is the most common distinction between an accent and a dialect is a dialect is how in this case English, how a language is spoken in a particular region as distinct from other regions. An accent would be, for example, if somebody learned a different language first, such as French, and then learned English second, and then while speaking English, certain aspects of the French language exert themselves while they're speaking English. I would call that a French accented English. So I teach a couple of accents. In other words, I teach a person how to sound as if They learned a certain language first, then learned English second, and while speaking English, sound as if that first language is exerting itself.
Well, there you
But
go.
more so, I teach dialects of English as distinct regionally from other dialects.
One of the interesting things I find about the people I meet from around the world is there's so many people that are multicultural, um, they've lived in different places around the world and spent, you know, years in different places, and they develop this world accent that maybe it's a little English, a little French, a little South African, a little American, and we're finding that more and more this homogenized in some way, but still
Mm-hmm.
different and unique accent.
Yeah.
These hybrids that are going on.
And it becomes a bit of a called for thing too. And I would prefer in casting specs that they call that a not pin downable international English speaking sound. I think that would be the best way to describe
I
that.
have actually seen that in specs. Uh,
Nice. Well, that's well spoken if that's how they describe it.
a
They
non-distinct
will sometimes
European
call that sound.
accent.
Yes, they'll sometimes say that. Yep. That particular sound, though, that not pin downable to any specific country, international English speaking sound, will sometimes be referred to as mid Atlantic.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah, because the usage being that not American, not UK, something in the middle, literally,
I
they'll sometimes use mid Atlantic English for
Yeah,
that,
Greenland.
which I would prefer they don't.
I got J Horse Black here. Hey Dave. Hey Tom. Tom, what type of dialects as a minimum should an actor have under their belt? English or British? What things do you suggest to new VO actors training wise, improv, etc.? Good question.
Yeah, good question. It I do defer to the question of where a person in what genres they wish to work, because the answer might be different based on different genres. But I do think that to begin to get a handle on how to acquire dialects, if you're a general American speaker, RP seeking an RP dialect, British dialect, or if you're a British speaker like the person I worked with today, um, who can do a posh British as well as their local. Uh, I already forgot it. Croydon, South London sound, which is not a posh sound in their natural speaking voice. They can already do two of those. So that would be analogous to me growing up in Boston and having a Bostonian dialect, but also being able to suppress it. In their case, the person I was working with today, they have a Croydon, South London sounds has a lot of similarities to Cockney sound, but they can posh it up. But they're working with me to acquire a general American dialect. They're actually quite good. This particular client is quite on their
And,
way.
and
So we begin to clean stuff up.
those Brits and those Aussies do wonderful American accents.
We
Uh,
do.
a lot of the reason they're listening and watching a lot of American television and movies. But
Absolutely.
before we get out of here, I want to bring this picture up and talk about you and the B. Brad Award that you were presented with at the Navigala in December.
That's
Uh,
total shit in my face at the tribute video that they played right before I stepped up.
yeah. Um, tell everyone what you did, who you are, that you were presented with the B. Brad Award. Brad Venable was one of the best of us, great guy, always willing to lend a hand, um, showed up everywhere, a wonderful talent, and he died suddenly. Uh,
Yeah.
but so beloved that we have this award in his name. It only goes to, and you are the very first recipient, by the way. Uh, it goes to people who have not necessarily had the greatest careers in the world, made the most money, but put themselves on the line for the voiceover community and stepped up. Tell me what this meant to you.
Wow. Yeah, it celebrates contribution to a community that first accepted me as I am, who I am, what I am. Um, at the end of my speech, and a little bit of a joke, I talk about all the people who have amplified me and given me an opportunity to work. And I say, and don't stop. Because we still need to get to the next job. We still need to work. But I think that what this celebrates is I love being an artist, and this community more than any other community in my life accepted that artist's heart, took it into theirs. Karen Gilfrey in that picture, and yourself, Dave, and so many critical people who have amplified me and celebrated me for what I chose to contribute. Um, I think I began to ping people's sonar and make a difference with recaps, social media recaps for things that I would attend, and sharing what I'd learned, Tom's takeaways. And I earned the nickname from Mark Gus, the resident encapsulator,
I like
because I would share what I learned. And in that act, I was amplifying the people I'd learned from. And I began to do that all the time. I still do it. And I do it however often I can. I'm busier now. Um, but I think that I also began to coach, and I began to make every effort to make a difference for my clients. And then I began to book more because I was being amplified more and I was being appreciated more and I was growing in confidence. So then I was able to start making an impact as an artist and as a person and as a contributor. So after a while, I all the while wearing my heart on my sleeve, as you said, and people noticed, and they saw in me Brad Venable like qualities. And I remember I got the phone call or I got a message from Karen and Tim. They wanted to run something by me. And I kind of have their ear on things, and they're my friends. And I thought that maybe they were asking for some Nava feedback, some kind of idea with Nava, and they were. And they showed me a little slideshow about the gala and how they were setting things up. I thought they were probably leaning toward asking my opinion on what they'd put together, which they did. But I didn't realize what they were aiming for ultimately. And as they're showing me stuff, I caught a typo, and I said, "Oh, you got a typo on that slide," and I'm helping them with the slide presentation that's leading them up to telling me that I'd won it. And so they start describing the award, and we're going to do this award and that award, and then this award, the B. Brad Award, Voiceover Community Award. They describe it, and they're showing me the slide for that, and I say, "Oh, this is great. This is going to be wonderful." And I think they're leading towards. So, what do you think about the flow of the evening that we've planned? So they click to the next slide, and they go, "And this is who's receiving it," and they bring up, and I was obliterated.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I can imagine.
And they gathered as many members of the board for that Zoom as possible, and there are quite a few of them there, and
Yeah.
it's amazing.
And
What did it mean to me?
Waterworks.
It meant I was seen, Dave. What did it mean to me? It meant I was seen by the community that I love. It meant, in shades of what being here tonight with you means, it meant what it feels like when we book, what it feels like to get that email from that producer for Chinook the other day, talking about how she adored listening to our deliveries of our lines, which she probably heard over and over and over hundreds of times in the editing phase, and loving it every single time. It even means what it means to me when my mother says, "Do Bilford, Tom."
Oh. Because
all right,
a lot of moms are telling you, "Look, don't do that voice again. Just go in your room, turn on the TV. I don't want to hear it." That's your mind. Hey, listen, we are out of time. Tom Antonellis, thank you so much for joining me today. Get a chance just to get to know you a little better. One of the best things about doing this is when I bring people on, sometimes they're people I know of but don't know them. You and I are friends, but I feel like I've gotten to know my friend even better because our paths are different yet similar. And when I say our paths, I'm talking about all of us in the community. And you are just a warm, fuzzy hug in the voiceover community. And I want you to know that you are appreciated.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you, Tom, everybody here. Thank you for being here. A reminder, all the Ask Dave Fennoy Anythings live on my YouTube channel, Dave Fennoy Voiceover Training. It's available to you 24/7, 365. Interested in coaching with me, DaveFennoy.com. Click on the Study VO tab. And once again, I'll just mention, if you'd like dialect training with Tom Antonellis, it's his name.com, TomAntonellis.com, and I believe he said there's a Study VO tab there. So,
TomAntonellisVO.com.
What's that? Oh,
TomAntonellisVO.com.
TomAntonellisVO.com. TomAntonellisVO.com. Did you get it? One more time. TomAntonellisVO.com. And with that, I'm going to leave you with my parting words. Book something. See you next week.